This is Keys to the Shop, episode 107, a conversation with Kyle Glanville and Charles Babinski of G&B Coffee and Go Get 'em Tiger. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. I'm excited to have you along today. We are going to be talking with Kyle Glanville and Charles Babinski of Go Get 'em Tiger and G&B Coffee, two just insanely great coffee bars in Los Angeles, California. And this conversation somewhat centers around this recent development where, as they've been a multi-roaster shop for these past 5 or so years running their cafes, they have started roasting their own coffee and are now switched over completely to their own roasted coffee, which is fantastic. And we explore that topic a bit here and the ins and outs of that, what the evolution of that decision was, how it's been going. And this is also going to be talking a bit about their philosophy on business and coffee. So this is really great conversation. I'm really glad to have gotten a chance to sit down with them in their new space where the roasting and pretty much everything else is going to be happening, their new base of operations. So you're in for a real treat today. Before we get started, of course, I do want to thank our sponsors here at Keys to the Shop. And we're going to start by thanking our sponsor, Prima Coffee. Now, Prima Coffee is a specialty coffee equipment supplier, and they're based out of Louisville, Kentucky. Now, from the beginning of their business, they have set out to make the best coffee brewing equipment available to the general public. Now, their focus is on curating the best equipment for every need, from grinders to espresso machines to under-counter refrigeration. Pretty much anything you can think of that you need for your coffee shop, they have it there. If you're expanding your cafes like G&B is doing, or you are getting ready to open your first cafe, this is the kind of place you want to go to help you outfit your space properly. They put a big emphasis on having the expertise to help their customers get the right gear to fit every situation. And so I highly encourage you, go to prima-coffee.com. That's prima-coffee.com. And check them out, see what they have to offer, and reach out to them, tell them Keys to the Shop sent you. And I'm sure they can help you on your coffee journey. And a big thanks again to Prima Coffee for their support of Keys to the Shop. Now, I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Pacific Foods. They are the folks behind the Pacific Barista series line of non-dairy performance beverages, which are designed specifically for professional baristas and the standards for excellence that they demand. So whether you're talking about almond, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk, its ability to take the heat from steaming, produce an unmatched silky texture, and keep the flavor balance focused on coffee makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. Pacific has been a longtime supporter of the coffee industry, the specialty coffee industry, and they demonstrate their passion for the community by listening to and serving the needs of real coffee professionals. So definitely go to pacificfoods.com, that's pacificfoods.com, and learn more about how the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages can help elevate the non-dairy offerings in your cafe. And my thanks to Pacific for their support of Keys to the Shop. So today we are going to be talking with the founders of the iconic coffee shops G&B Coffee and Go Get 'em Tiger. Kyle Glanville and Charles Babinski are essentially dynamos in the retail coffee world. They are both U.S. Barista champions, Kyle in 2008 and Charles in 2015. And they started G&B Coffee as a pop-up concept that eventually landed a space in the Grand Central market. They were both working at Intelligentsia Coffee when they decided to join forces and start this business, and G&B Coffee quickly became a fixture in the LA coffee scene, especially known for its quick warm service and also bar-style service. G&B Coffee won accolades like Best New Coffee Bar of the Year, one of the world's 5 best coffee bars, Best Coffee Shop in California, just to name a few. Now, just under a month after opening G&B at the Grand Central Market, Go Get 'em Tiger was opened, and it was armed with the same coffees that are the hallmark of G&B, It is a small, bright, and fast-paced neighborhood cafe, and it features the highly regarded service, but it also incorporates breakfast and lunch that is comprised of fresh market ingredients and celebrates food as an essential complement to great coffee. So both of these concepts, G&B Coffee and Go Get 'em Tiger, are community-based coffee hubs that are aiming to give warm and just extraordinarily high standards of service to the community in LA. G&B and Go Get 'em Tiger have been a multi-roaster shop for the past 5 or so years, until recently, about a couple weeks ago, it was announced that under the name of Go Get 'em Tiger, they are going to be roasting their own coffee. And in fact, they have completely switched over to roasting their own coffee in all of their shops. And that's quite a transition considering the fact that they are one of the nation's, or were one of the nation's best multi-roaster shops. Is a hard undertaking, and they were a prime example of how to do it right. And that is actually something that we talk about in this conversation. We discuss their experience as a multi-roaster shop, the strategy that they're taking in roasting their own coffee. Like, how did they learn how to do that? What are the steps that they took to guarantee quality and consistency for their cafes? Why are they not going to be doing wholesale? What kind of expansion plans do they have for their cafes? How did they use what they learned from QCing other roasters to help them find their own path in roasting, and a bunch of other things we talk about throughout this conversation that I think you're going to find helpful as a professional retailer of specialty coffee, especially if you're thinking about roasting your own coffee. These guys are inspirational. All that they've been able to accomplish and their focus on challenging themselves and also the community. These are two people that you definitely want to listen to. And I'm really excited that I got an opportunity to go down to their new space where they're going to be housing their commissary kitchen and their roasting space and their training lab and their new base of operations there in LA while I was in town for Coffee Fest. So you'll notice some warehouse noise, and you'll see that the audio quality is not like it. We're not in a studio or anything, but you should be able to make out everything just fine. So heads up on that. But this conversation is pure gold, and I really am thankful to have gotten an opportunity to record this for you, because I think it's going to be super beneficial. So without further ado, I want to bring you to my conversation with the founders of G&B Coffee and Go Get 'em Tiger, Kyle Glanville and Charles Babinski.
Kyle Glanville, Charles Babinski, thank you for having me in your now construction site, soon to be vast roasting empire.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks. Good to have you.
It's a huge space. I just got the tour, and it's really fascinating what you're doing. It's not just a roastery that you were saying; it's a commissary kitchen. Describe the function of this space a little bit.
Our cafes are coffee. Coffee is the center of gravity. It sort of drives everything that we do, for sure. But we also have had and have grown this food program that's all in-house over the years, and which includes baking all of our own pastries. It includes serving up a hot food menu at all of our Go Get 'em Tigers. Mm-hmm. That's actually pretty good. And also, we are somewhat vertically integrated with all of our sort of the most of the ingredients that cafes would get from another place. We make ourselves. Like our nut milk is all made in-house painstakingly. The chai, we have this turmeric-based drink that we make the concentrate for in-house. We make fizzy hoppy tea, et cetera, et cetera. And so we are... we're sort of embarking. When we first started the company, when we were optimistic and full of hope, before the harsh realities of entrepreneurship came crashing down on us, we said, we want to become an LA institution. And to us, I think at the time that meant something like 20 locations in LA. We wanted to be like In-N-Out Burger, or something like that. And we're less interested. I think because we're older and we're dads. I think we're less interested in it being, you know, like if we were perceived exactly the way that In-N-Out Burger was perceived, like that would be like we would be floating on cloud nine. And so now, you know, after 5 years of operating our cafes, we have 3 shops. 3 is one too many if you want to be just like tiny and show up and be a barista every day. And it's many too few if you want to like grow into the kind of systems where you start to get really good at like very dialed in high volume production.
It's an awkward number.
It is. I mean, you basically like you want 1 or you want 10. Everything in between just sucks. And so we have had the good fortune of having our 3 shops be really busy and I would say embraced by the community here. It took a while. It wasn't always like that, but now we're kind of going into the next phase of our business development, which is to go back to that original goal of becoming an institution in LA and sort of pursue it with vigor. So this is the backbone to our operation.
Okay.
This is our hub, and this is where everything will sort of start.
And this is something you had decided somewhere along the way. It's been 5 years since you started G&B, and somewhere along the line you decided that we're going to roast our own coffee, because was that the thing that you decided later in the 5 years, or had you always decided from the beginning we want to roast our own?
That was 100% not the thing that we decided from the beginning.
Okay.
From the beginning, we reveled in the idea of not roasting. And the advantages that came with that. So we started and were, up until a week and a half ago, a multi-roaster cafe, and prided ourselves on being able to vet the coffees that came in, you know, have relationships with roasters, but be able to basically only buy coffees that we truly loved and you know, shown on blind cupping. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago that it started to change and it started to turn, and the wisdom in the thinking started to point towards us roasting our own.
Yeah,
What
I think
specifically,
I think for us, it seemed in the early days, the clearest path for us to achieve the kind of quality bar that we had set would be to just basically cherry pick from all the best coffees from all the best roasters, and so. We set up this purchasing model that was kind of a riff on a green coffee purchasing model. I spent some time as a coffee buyer at Intelligentsia, and our sort of approach was to kind of like look at roasters as like co-ops or exporters and just like get as many samples as we could, taste them blind, and then buy purely off of quality. So I think like even in the sort of multi-roaster universe, where I think most multi-roaster cafes are sort of seeking out what the new brand is or some brand that gets people excited. And we have been completely brand agnostic, pretty much. I mean, I would say maybe with the exception of like 49 Espressos. Most coffees, every other coffee we've ever bought has
49
had to
parallels, like Epic and things
yeah,
like that.
I mean, there was something to be said for the fact that over the years, like, you appreciate the consistency and the quality that came from the best roasters.
Yeah.
And if I had a big takeaway, I would say that, I mean, a lot changed in tasting and sampling, you know, coffee from United States and Canada in those 6 years, and it was a pretty remarkable shift. Like I probably cupped, I don't even know, like you lose count, but like hundreds of different roasters, and you know, probably thousands of samples by the end of all of this. And like at the beginning, there was an incredible gulf between the best and the worst, and now there isn't, but there is definitely a difference between the people who are just putting the absurd amount of work in and the right type of work, like 49th Parallel and Heart, and the people on the tier below.
Okay.
So, you know, one of the takeaways was like, even though we're brand agnostic with the coffees, the best roasters had the best coffees more often than not.
I think Hart has only not been on our shelves once.
Yeah.
Wow.
But they earned their way on every time. And what was cool about a roaster like Hart, and way more rare than I think anybody would want to accept, is that almost with every other new roaster that we would find and be like, oh, okay, we would have to ask for a second sample.
Yeah.
And usually the second sample almost always, if it was an unknown roaster or somebody who we had never approved before, almost always the second sample would not come in at the same quality.
They just come in different.
Yeah, but with Hart, it was like, and 49th. I mean, I think they are our heroes. I think our roasting heroes are Hart and 49th. And, they just ended up being there always.
It kind of won you over the years of carrying their product.
Yeah. Oh, and then, I mean, from the beginning, like the profile, like 49th's profile for espresso was the gold standard in our minds, and Hart's consistency and quality for filter coffee was.
49th is the kings. They're the kings of the espresso, and Hart are the kings of the filter coffee. Yeah, I think.
So you mentioned, Charles, that there was a point at which you decided that's starting to roast your own coffee. In spite of these great coffees that you're getting from these roasters, especially from Hart and 49th, it was like, okay, we need to start roasting our own. And you've had a really successful opening of your cafes, Go Get 'em Tiger and G&B, and now the customers know that you're a multi-roaster shop, but you said, hey, we're going to roast our own. What specifically was it that made you decide this is the road we have to take?
Well, I mean, it's never the road you have to take.
Right,
It's
sure.
It's just the one that you do, and then
it's a pretty good idea.
You head in that direction. You don't turn back. Like there were a few different things that affected the decision. The first is, we have a tendency, like just the way that we think about things and the way that we dive into stuff, we want to work it out ourselves, figure it out ourselves. Like instead of, like we're going to make an alternative milk, how can we make the best one and then try to engineer it so that it makes some semblance of sense for our operations. Mm-hmm. And so I think in all of that, like the more we dived into tasting coffees, we were inevitably going to be more interested in roasting our own. But honestly, like we love the partnership with the different roasters. We loved being able to cherry pick the best coffees. The Death Knell was simply that once we hit a certain size.
Death Knell is how you're phrasing the move to.
Well, no. The Death Knell on the model for multi roasters.
Okay.
The Death Knell for us being able to do that. The end of that era, the harbinger of its doom.
I love it.
Extinction.
The harbinger of doom was just that we were hitting a size where the ability to cherry pick just became blunted, right? Like if you're buying a coffee, if there's a roaster that pops up and they have this really wonderful Columbia micro lot and they have 2 bags of it or 3 bags of it, and you have 7 shops and you're doing 3,000 pounds a week, right? Mm-hmm. Then it just disappears. And at a certain point, like if you're going to guarantee that you're going to be able to have coffee of a certain quality, you have to commit to things ahead of time, right? You'd have to take those relationships with the roasters a little bit further, mm-hmm. where you're committing to coffees that haven't even been roasted yet, and at that point, which is like I think it would be a sensible step, but at that point, if we are going to be doing that work, and we have this predilection towards like diving in, then it just became clear that that's where things were headed.
A lot of the roasters that we were working with were kind of like seeing what was coming, and they were trying to pivot into this thing with us where they were like, you just choose the green and we'll roast it. Sure. And we were like, well, we're kind of buying your selection. Like that's and like we were always like, when I think roasters were like, we'll custom blah 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 for you, we were like, no. Well, mm-hmm. 49 did one.
Yeah.
But like generally it was, the whole point was you're the maker and we're going to be the best wholesale account ever because we will, for the most part, pay our bills on time. And we don't need any support. We don't need any training. We don't need your technicians. We don't need anything. And we'll buy a lot of volume. But I think, for the kinds of roasters that we were sort of finding and working with, we were seeing the sort of early warning signs that this model was stressed. And also I think we're just the type of people that kind of savor the notion of doing stuff ourselves, which is why we do all this stuff ourselves, why we do the chai and the nut milks and all the other stuff. And we never had any desire to wholesale.
Okay.
And so that was another thing that was if we have 7 locations, which is where we'll be at some point early next year, we won't have to wholesale. Our consumption internally is high enough that we can power a roasting operation.
Okay, that was going to be a question of mine, which was simply is wholesale something you're going for with roasting your own? You just want to supply your own shops.
Supply our own shops, and then we're launching this new vertical, which is the e-commerce subscription program. But generally speaking, what we love to do, our professional goals are centered around dealing directly with customers. And
Right.
so that's the universe that we're dealing with. That's mostly because that's what we like. And we built this company, ourselves. And, the first thousands of customers that were served by our company were served by Charles and I, and a lot of them still come in. And so this is just us building our sort of the dialogue and the sort of nature of our relationship with our customers.
And wholesale is a different business. And there's I've witnessed with other businesses that do retail and wholesale that decisions which would be easy if you had a singular focus become really, really, really hard. And what's good for wholesale is not always good for retail.
Sure. So you got a blend for somebody that is a good customer of yours, but you can't use it in your shops because you don't necessarily like it, but they want it. And what are you going to do with that inventory?
Or at Intelligentsia, we would just have wholesale customers that'd be like, cool, I opened my shop, and then we go and see it, and we'd be like, where's your name? And he's like, no, we're just called Intelligentsia. And it'd be like, oh,
wait a second.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason that Charles and I are in this career or any career that we would be in is because we want to wake up, feel like we're motivated by doing something great. And I think that with a sort of very boutique coffee or any other sort of crafted product operation, the sort of motivated sales strategy and that boutique sort of crafted thing are just naturally at odds. There's not a wholesale sales person in coffee who isn't incentivized to continue to bring in new business. And once you've exhausted made the rounds with all the 50 pound a week multi-roasters, it's now you've got hotels. How do you get that hotel business? It's not going to be with your $14 a pound Kenyas.
It's very price sensitive.
Yeah. And so for us, it's, we preserve some of the margin. It actually gives us room to kind of slide the price that we've been charging down without that being in conflict with our wholesale customers, right? Because that was a discussion at Intelligentsia, is we can't be too competitive at retail because our wholesale customers will have to sell their coffee for more.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and so there's very little conflict. We're focused on the end user, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so this just makes sense. This move to roast your own because, like you said, you like to do things yourself. You like the hands-on. That's a value you had from the beginning. 'Cause you started when you started the company. You were making your own nut milks right from the beginning, right?
Right from the beginning. Yeah.
That was in the business plan and your vision for the company.
We were bottling cold brew back before that was like $1 billion enterprise with a little home canning machine.
Yeah, where's your billions?
Yeah, I know. I'm waiting. Jab. Waiting.
So wherever you were when you made the decision to do it, what's your next step? I mean, what does one do when one decides to roast their own coffee?
I mean, we decided a long time before we were able to, maybe not a long time, but it was more just like, okay, this is where things are headed, and from there it's an enormous undertaking to start roasting, and we haven't even finished the undertaking. Like, we are building out this space right now, and it might be months before it's finished.
Might be.
It will be. It will be months.
It is certainly going to be months.
Yeah. But what the first thing is, honestly, it's kind of funny to look back on it, because it's just literally just taking the terrifying plunge into roasting your own. We sourced some coffee, and
Charles went to Honduras and he came back with 5 bags of coffee, and I was like, what the hell are we supposed to do with 5 bags of coffee?
well, it turns out you're supposed to roast it, and that's what we did.
And how many bags did we actually roast, though? It was not all 5.
No, it was I think it was 3 bags, and we roasted 2 of them. But yeah, so we sourced this coffee, and we had to take the plunge to roasting it, and I think that's that is reflective of the way that I approach these things, which is you just get on the path, and it doesn't really matter where you start on the path, right? Okay. If you're putting your one foot in front of the other, and you're being honest about the progress that you're making, and you're being thoughtful about how you could make more progress, you will go very far in maybe not a short amount of time, but eventually, right? So we
entered the roasting process fully assured that we would be very bad at it.
Assured by yourselves or others?
No. We felt internally, we were how long do you think we have to suck miserably at roasting before we can make something drinkable?
What was your estimate?
I thought it would take at least a year.
Okay. Yeah. And had you either had roasting experience, either of you?
No.
Funny enough, no. I've said and maintained my non-roasting streak in my coffee career. I've never roasted a bean of coffee, and I plan on keeping that alive. I have no desire to roast coffee. Okay. I'm a barista. That's my MO.
I had basically no roasting experience. Once the closest thing was Deaton Piggott on his last week at Intelligentsia. I asked him if he would let me roast a few batches, and he did the very verboten thing of acquiescing. So my only roasting experience before that was 3 or 4 batches.
It was illegal Intelligentsia roasts.
So this is not last week, but his last week working at Intelligentsia.
Yeah. This is 7 years ago.
Exactly.
8 years ago.
Yeah. So now, I mean, you have some experience doing it. You just relied on friends or other people that can teach you about roasting to get started? Or?
We relied on a very good regular customers of ours by the name of Scott Rayo, who was a fount of wisdom in the early days.
Yeah. He got us past, I think, probably 6 months of really hard lessons, very quickly. Okay. By just kind of describing some basic concepts to us.
And he's a good person to be get your head out of your ass. You don't know what you're doing. Stop fiddling around with things and focus on what would be essentially the fundamentals. Right.
He must have that actually sitting in a Word doc somewhere. Yeah. So every time I email him an idea, he just copy paste.
It's like a text expander.
It's huge. Don't be an idiot, Glanville.
But yeah, even just him looking at roasting curves and making suggestions, tasting coffee, giving feedback, it was really, really essential. And I don't think the nice thing about going into it as somebody without any experience was that I didn't have a whole lot of ego about it, and the experience that I did have was in tasting all these other roasters' coffees. So when I was basically being told this isn't good enough, or this is borderline terrible, like I had the context to understand that was in fact true.
Yeah, you said we determined we're going to suck it first, and so you're like, yeah, it makes sense. We already planned on that.
Yeah, and I mean it is literally just like once you're on the path, you're on the path. Like you just, as long as you're getting better, that's all that matters.
Okay, so how long would you say it took to get to the point where you put it on the shelves in your stores? Because in the announcement for this, you did say if you've been at G&B or Go Get 'em Tiger, you probably have been drinking our coffee.
It took longer than expected, but that was less about the coffee and more about the having the bags to put it in.
Oh,
yeah. So the coffee just went on the shelves last week.
Yeah.
But we had been brewing it, and so like we started, I think, with cold brew, and then we developed an espresso for milk, and then we maybe did a few single origin espressos and the occasional filter coffee. And then there was kind of like a switch in speed or switch in velocity. We just started buying more coffees. We got into a little bit of a rhythm with like Red Fox and other sort of vendors and providers, and just kind of ramped it up. And we set this as a target date. We set August as a target date, and Charles and Zakia, who's our head of QC, like really got down to business with like, okay, we got to buy some coffees. Yeah. And we I think have felt confidence in our coffees, like real confidence in our coffees for like the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. And I think yeah, if we could have done it a little bit earlier, we would have. Definitely by the end, we were chomping at the bit to just get the coffees out there. I feel like, yeah. So for the first year, it was myself and Zakia Mason, who was our first trainer and came into the like coffee QC role. And our approach was never like, neither of us approached it as roasters. We approached it as people who were kind of like had a little bit of a sense of sourcing, a little bit of sense of training, a little bit of sense of brewing, a little bit of sense of roasting. Yeah. And trying to make the pieces fit in some holistic way that would make something good for the end user, or make something good for the person sitting in a cafe.
Roasting for beverage quality.
Yeah. Roasting for the right use. Like that was one of the only advantages that we had over the people who were selling us coffee, which is that we knew exactly where these coffees were going, and we knew exactly what the vision was for what that experience was going to be.
And most roaster retailers, like the baristas and the roasters, are very siloed, and they have their own goals. And usually, like the roasters just get sick of hearing it from the baristas, and so like I'll send you what I'll send you, and you'll like it. Yeah. And the baristas just get grumpy or whatever. But I think we kind of work from the consumer back to what's happening in the machine, and like. One of the first things that we observed when we were cupping all these coffees in the early days, we were taking all this diagnostic input off the coffees, and like the coffees that we loved consistently extracted around 21% or up on the cupping table. Nice. And like coffees that roasters were very assured of, oftentimes were extracting in the 17.5 to 19.5%. And this might be a shock to, I think, most of your listeners. The correlation between extractability and roast degree was virtually non-existent. So like, you would think like, oh, the lighter coffees barely extract and the darker coffees just like give up all the goods. It's just not that way. A lot of the really dark coffees that we tried were really poor extracting coffees, and vice versa. A lot of the like very lightest. I mean, Hearts were always registered. Like even back in the day when Heart was like on the absolute vanguard of being the lightest roaster in the States, they always extracted more fully than most other coffees.
So it's a development issue and not necessarily that color.
Yeah. I mean, it's something like definitely. So we figured out some basic sort of analytics for comparative extractability, which definitely like gave us a window into the value of having the right product for the systems that you have. Right. I mean, like I don't know how far you can say like there's good extractability and bad extractability, because they're just two different products. And part of the thing is like if you've got a coffee that extracts at 100% of theoretical extractability, you set your systems for that, right? And if you swap that coffee out for one that's extracting at 90% of what the other one is, then you have to change grinds more. You have to like change your your machine temperature, whatever it is.
Sure.
Like you're suddenly having to contort your systems to suit that coffee, and it's just not ideal.
Yeah, especially when you're at that like awkward 3 stores and you're expanding your stores, you're not going to want that much labor to be put into just tweaking your shops around these different
and most
roasters
of those tweaks just are diminishing returns.
Yeah,
like you're not like the dialing in. I feel like the mythology of dialing in is like we just have a recipe written on the grinder, and it's like 18 in, 40 out, 30 seconds. Like like we don't want some like Todd comes in and Todd's like, yeah, but I know like I'll make coffee the Todd way when I'm on bar, which means I'll tamp harder and I'll cram more coffee in and whatever, which is like very much right like of the era when we were sort of becoming known coffee professionals. That was the thing. Like the best baristas that you'd watch, it was like an athletic event. Like you'd have the rober and they'd be like cranking the collar and just like whapping the hell out of the
very aggressive craft.
and then like I remember like at first it was like tamp and then tap and then tamp again, and then some people were like, I don't tamp twice, I tamp 3 times.
Oh, wow, yeah. You got to get those grounds off the sides,
right?
Yeah. Channel.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, the way that we talk about coffee now, like extraction recipes, is almost unrecognizable. Like in the mornings, they take the recipe from the previous day, they run it, they adjust it until they're hitting it, and then they taste it. And they put it on the refractometer and make adjustments as necessary, and the path is pretty clear. Yeah. And once we're like in range and things taste good, like that's we're not
weighing every shot. We're not.
Well, we are, because we got the PB.
There you go.
We do weigh every shot. but we like committed to volumetrics. We committed to FETCOs. We committed to removing sort of the manual elements where there's just so much error, and we decided to trust systems over like the moment to moment whims of people who are working under hopefully a lot of pressure because there's a lot of customers.
Yeah. Which would it would inevitably break down at some point. Somebody makes the wrong decision. I mean,
I just remember, being on the bar at Victrola and like you're eyeballing, like this shot barely dripped out of the portafilter and the next shot was gushing, and like you kind of knew why, but you didn't really know why. And like the best baristas were the ones who could like contain that at like as much as possible, but like the amount of error that or the amount of like foul coffee I made then versus like what somebody on our bars now with a week of training it's not even comparable.
Right.
Like we can get anybody up and running, and it's not because it's easy. It's still really hard to master, but like the concepts are simple. Here's a recipe, replicate that recipe. And what we've also found over time is like, even from coffee to coffee, those recipes are not going to vary that wildly.
If the coffee is similarly extractable.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're roasting all of your own coffee, then you can control that from the ground.
Yeah. And all that stuff. So that's like a big, interesting conversation that I could go in a bunch of different directions. The whole so some of it is extractability, and then some of it is just like you have that recipe for a reason, right? Like 18 in, the dose isn't going to change dramatically unless you change the basket, right? So, putting 22 grams of coffee in there or 12 grams of coffee in a 17-gram basket wouldn't make anything better.
Sure.
It would have a deleterious effect. And if the yield is going to be contingent on just being able to extract, you're pulling enough of a volume to be able to extract. And then just like a specific decision you've made about what type of concentration, what type of product you want to offer people.
Mm-hmm.
And like that is like with the filter coffee, we shoot for a specific range of TDS because we sat down and made the decision that that was the expression of coffee that we wanted to offer.
It's part of our brand and part of what people know, that they're getting from us.
And and like to change that on a whim would be, or to change it like on a dime, right? It'd be a meaningful thing to do. It'd be saying like we're changing the basic, our most popular item in a dramatic way.
I'm really loving this Guatemala at 1.2.
Yeah. Thanks, Todd.
So doing this is again, going back to that idea of you creating and controlling the processes yourself, the way you make everything in-house, and then the customer gets to experience consistency across the board in all your stores. You're expanding your stores beyond 3 stores, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where this is going to be absolutely necessary. What is it that scares you the most about this process?
Cash. Sorry. That's
Right.
probably not the answer that, like people want to hear. But I mean, yeah, I have so much confidence. Like the team that we have is so amazing. Like if this group of minds can't like solve this problem, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but if they can't, then it's like not solvable.
Mm-hmm.
For us, it's like, money, getting everything up and making it profitable. And that's the thing that keeps me up at night. For sure.
Yeah. And then what other kind of operational...
Sorry, that's probably not the direction you were hoping for that.
No, I mean, one of the things that I'm interested in knowing is just not only like what scares you. I'm sure there's also things that you've experienced that you've overcome too. Like cash might be an issue that you have to deal with for a long time, or at least for a while.
Yeah.
But what are the challenges that you've faced that you're now in a place of like, all right, that was scary at the time, but now we're at the other side of it, and we know we have a little bit more confidence in what we're doing than we had before.
I mean, every shop opening,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest, when we opened G&B and the first Go Get 'em Tiger, they opened within a month of each other. We went from 0 stores to 2 stores in 4 weeks. And I think we got some reasonable press. Eater wrote about us. The LA Times wrote about us.
Yeah.
Sprudge obviously wrote about us. And I remember feeling very confident that we would throw our doors open, and not that we would have like masses, but that we would be sustainable. Like people would be interested in knowing more about us. And the truth is that we threw our doors open, and there were those people, but certainly not enough to make it a cash flow positive enterprise from day one.
Okay.
And so that process of building that initial core of customers was more arduous and longer than I would have expected.
But we're reaping the rewards of it still. Like just having gone through that process and made those connections, and like, people who are our first customers are still some of our best customers, still some of our closest friends.
Yeah.
Some of our investors. I married one of them. Like those connections are something that have value even now, enormous value, 6 years later.
Yeah. We do love marrying our customers.
Yes. It is a thing.
It's it's in the handbook.
Thrive at.
So when you have fought so hard for the customers that you have now, was there a time where you doubted what you were doing by changing the model to roasting your own, in that maybe this is the wrong decision because they know us because of this, and we don't want to push them away, because if we push them away, then who's going to come to our shops?
I think that there's like a little bit of like, we love the reason why we serve.
It's not really our nature.
Yeah. the reason why we served 49th and Hart and all these other roasters and all these coffees is because we loved them, right? So like it wasn't, there was a part of it's like a bittersweet thing to not be serving it on the bar, but like we see, like it's so exciting to be able to source and roast and share these coffees, and it feels like so consequential and so meaningful that we know that even if we lose people and even if we, some of the connections that we have change, like we have something of power and we have something that is meaningful and that we can build off of.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that most of our customers know, like, their relationship to Go Get 'em Tiger is as a place, first and foremost. It's about the community, which is something that we've put forth a pretty concerted effort to boost up. And I think that and I'm hopefully not, overestimating this, and the early returns are good. But I think that they trust our decisions on coffee quality. Until proven otherwise, like, our folks are with us. And so what mostly, we've heard, and I'm sure there's people who don't feel as hyped about it, but for the most part, it's, I think, given our customers another reason to love what we do. Because, there's like always every once in a while, and it still surprises me, but there's always like they're great, but they don't roast.
Interesting.
There's like still that little bit of that mentality.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Also, like, somebody can walk into G&B on a Saturday, get a espresso, and be served by Matthew or Paula, who are the people who roasted the coffee, which is like an absurdly like cool thing,
very unique
to happen.
Yeah,
and so there's a connection there that we just can't have otherwise. And yeah, it's awesome.
Is that what gives you the most joy? Is that reaction, like having that ability to have people trust you even more in the process with coffee? Or what is it that really motivates you in the midst of all this construction and things that keep you up at night? What really drives you?
I mean, I think we just love it. Like we love the, like, you have a vision for something, right? And you get into the nuts and bolts of how to make that reality. Mm-hmm. And jumping into roasting means that we get to jump into this whole unexplored sector of work that we haven't experienced before, and that's just fun.
We're also really project-oriented people, so we want to give ourselves new projects all the time. I mean, honestly, like, even if I had $1 billion, I would still want to open new things all the time, or start new businesses, or launch new products or whatever, because it's fun. And especially like once you've built up a little bit of a brand and there's like an audience like waiting to see what you do, that's really thrilling.
It gives the momentum behind you, right?
Yeah. Well, so like, those first 2 shops when we opened them, it was like crickets. And then the third one, we did a friends and family event one afternoon, invited 60 people. And by 45 minutes into the thing, there was a line of like 100 people. And I was like, where did you, somebody had put it on Instagram, and it just like made the rounds. This was the Los Feliz store.
Oh, okay.
It's just different. Like, people are excited to see what we're gonna do, and the Highland Park shop that we're opening up next month is like a really cool evolution. Like, we've taken all the we really screwed up these things in our shops, and we're trying to solve them. We're trying to get better. We're not like, there's no replicating. Like, there's things that work that we're like, okay, how do we enhance that thing that works even more? Mm-hmm. And there's things that really don't, that needed to be changed. And like, Highland Park is like our next, it's our next sort of thesis on what this thing can be.
And there's new things, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a conveyor belt. We're gonna have a conveyor belt for our drink queue.
Yeah.
Because like at G&B, right? So G&B on a Sunday or Saturday, busiest moments. There are moments when we have all 6. We have a 3-group PB, where we have 6 portafilters running. So while 3 shops are going, 3 are being prepped, and the machine's basically functioning all the time to the degree where we were putting in a PB that was custom made with a preheater so that we don't lose the heat there. Now, so shots aren't the bottleneck, but we're moving through so many different drinks that we have this position called the bar boss, right? And the bar boss is meant to be the expediter, right? Or the person who's like, making sure that every
managing
single...
the queue, making sure it goes out where it needs to go.
This person is just moving cups. That's all they're doing the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're putting in a conveyor belt.
Yeah. 4 feet long.
Yeah. So that you could do it just with a single motion.
Yeah,
That
the whole
is
queue goes
amazing.
down.
Yeah.
That is great. So that is...
That's not the only thing. There's other cool
No,
stuff.
I'm sure there is.
I don't know.
Is that the coolest thing? Is that...
I think it's
That's
awesome.
the one that'll
it's
be on
pretty awesome.
everybody's Instagram.
But it's also like one other thing that you'd be surprised how many of the things that we're doing today are stuff that we talked about after a long day 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the conveyor belt is at least 3 years old.
Yeah.
Roasting, these are the bag design, the shop designs, all of these things are informed by a vision that has been fomenting for years. So it's cool. It's cool with the conveyor belt. It's a cool thing, but it's also cool to see the harebrained idea from 3 years ago show up in reality.
Yeah, and you've got to the point where you can actually do it. Not that you couldn't do it before, but maybe you weren't as busy as you would have needed to be to put it in place, right?
Yeah, and also you got to find the person who's going to take that challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, we need this kind of conveyor belt. It's not on the market. It's something that we needed an engineer to sort.
Yeah.
One of the most exciting things about this building up the space, just from a professional what do you call it, we finally did this. We're getting a roller milk grinder. We dreamed of having a roller milk grinder from day one, and when the spot is operational, there will be a roller mill grinder grinding coffee for every shop every morning.
Yeah. 86 grinders.
86
Wow.
grinders.
So you're still doing the pre-grinding of the coffee at all your stores?
We pre-grind the espresso.
Espresso.
Yeah. But within a 30-minute window.
Okay.
So it's not 12 hours. But
Wow. That's exciting.
But this would be for filter coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I feel like people would definitely be requesting shifts at this new store just to work the conveyor belt or...
Yeah. No, I think people are excited. And then we owe it to the existing shops to go back and try to filter in some of the new stuff.
Yeah, all the good ideas are in this new shop, but what about these bad ones over here?
Yeah. There's stuff like that, which is that kind of idea is just a tinkerer's mindset, I think.
Yeah.
But then there's also there's technology that is enabling methods of service that make us better at our job. One silly one is our text messaging thing. You can text us your order. You can come into the cafe. You can sit outside at Los Feliz and text us bring me a coffee, and somebody will bring you a coffee.
Okay.
Or you can say gosh, I have a sleeping baby in the car. I've got the hazards on. I'm out front at the curb, and it's great. We'll bring you your coffee. And so that for us this sort of, and what's funny about that is that service is getting more and more popular because it's badass, it's great.
Yeah.
But people don't trust how good it is. So the barrier to entry is just skepticism. No way I can just say I want a cappuccino and you're gonna make it for me. No way I can just sit outside and park my lazy bum on the bench and you'll take care of me.
Okay.
But that's such a cool opportunity, and there's more stuff like that that's coming.
You guys are just pushing it.
Yeah.
TLC. There was a salt and pepper.
Yeah.
Salt is definitely
Like
not TLC. It was definitely salt and pepper.
But strangely, we're pushing it like TLC,
Real good.
which is maybe our problem.
Yeah.
Very
No
well.
wonder the pushing was so ineffective.
When you sit across from somebody, or if you're sitting across from somebody who wants to, maybe is in the same position, they have a couple of stores, maybe they have a few stores, and they want to also take the plunge, the scary plunge, into roasting their own, but they've become such fans of people that they use, and they're worried about these commitments that they've made to their customers and to the wholesalers and all these things. What advice do you have from your journey doing this to them? What are the things that they should think about and do?
Take the time to learn. Like, we've been roasting for 18 months, you know, and with a lot of humility, with the good sense to like find advisors and mentors to help us and to share our progress with, and gave ourselves a little bit of ramp up time to build, a few sort of relationships in the early days to like get some good green. But, I think like you want to make sure that, just like us, like when you finally pull the trigger and you're like, okay, we are a roaster now, that you're good at what you do. Because I still believe, even though there's a lot of noise and there's like a lot of, it can be confusing if you want to drink nice coffee to know what's nice and what's not. I still believe that ultimately the people who execute at the highest level are the ones who are going to be at the top when the dust settles. And so be good. Like, quality is a language that appeals to everybody. Everybody wants nice things.
So, no.
I would say you don't have to do it. Like, you don't have to do it. Like, if you don't want to do it, don't be compelled to do something. Like, we did it because we were genuinely like excited by the prospect of diving into this whole other world. And I think for a lot of people who, are at that place with their business, like, allow it to, the business should let you do things that you're excited about, and you should grow it in a way that is meaningful to you. And for us, this was roasting. So I don't it's weird. Like, I think a lot of these conversations in coffee can be really prescriptive, and the idea is that something that works for one person, is going to work for somebody else.
Yeah.
Or the idea that like, if you get to, 3 shops, like, you have to roast for yourself. Like, I mean, we could have opened up 10 shops and bought coffee from, companies like 49th and Hart, and there would have been a lot of really wonderful advantages to doing it. It was just not the path that we were going to take, given what our focuses are.
Yeah, it would have been a lot less sort of off the cuff to the amount of planning that would go into running a multi-roaster 10 location thing would be very different. I mean, I also think, if you're 3 stores and you're building a roastery, then you are going to have to hitch your wagon to some wholesale. And like, wholesale for boutique roasters right now is trash. Cool. It is so bad because it's a bunch of G&Bs out there. It's a bunch of like we're gonna carry you amongst 8 other coffees, and we'll buy very small amounts weekly. And it's not 10 years ago, if you were Intelligentsia, you would just like get that 200 pound a week business and get that like, kind of real accounts. Now it's a lot more effort for a lot fewer, for a lot less volume.
Right. You're chasing things that don't really give you a return.
Yeah. So like, our whole thing is predicated on some real retail scale.
Okay.
And which is, I think, somewhat unique. Most of the roasters that are out there, with the exception of Blue Bottle, but most of the roasters that are out there, getting these big rounds of financing and who are having these massive exits, are powering that through ready to drink beverages, canned coffee,
Yeah.
or which sounds pejorative, but it's just what it is.
True.
Or wholesale, or some like retail distribution channel that it's just huge.
Okay.
If you're just trying to be like a 15 kilo machine in 1,000 square feet, like, and you want to wholesale it and do it with Kenyas and Ethiopias and that kind of, like, that's tough.
Yeah. Like you were saying, it's a whole nother business to do wholesale. Yeah. Another staff, another culture. So practically speaking, when we make the decision to roast our own coffee, and you say be good, what I'm hearing you say is take the time to, like you said, we're going to suck for a certain amount of time. And a lot of people might want to be good right away, or think because they roast their own coffee that they're automatically better because they did it themselves, so that will sell the coffee. How does one go about being better? Or how do you know that you're good, practically speaking, or the exercises that you do to become fit in roasting?
I mean, I think, rely on outside eyes a lot. Find a mentor, find somebody who can sort of shepherd you, who's willing to, either for free or on a paid basis. I think that both Charles and I can say, like, those times where we've reached out to people who you would think maybe would be too busy or have better things to do or not want to talk to or not want to share insight, those times where we've actually reached out to those people, we've almost always been met with like a very receptive and warm. I think like everybody wants to be contacted and be heard, right? And so if you're like somebody who's run their own coffee business for 10 years and somebody who's coming up in the game, like, wants some advice, like, I just don't, it's not as hard to get as folks think. I don't get, emails like, I want to start a cafe. And when I do, it's like, oh my gosh, that's great.
We have a whole episode about this, by the way.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you're speaking some truth there.
Yeah, well, so like the first people that we reached out to, one was Ulysses Romero, who started Tierra Mia Coffee here, which is a really great sort of Mexican-American cafe chain here that, he's like a Stanford MBA and like came at it from like, I'm learning coffee, but I know business side. And then the other person that we reached out to who was extremely generous was Martin Diedrich, who was just like instantly receptive, spent like 3 hours with us in the first like time we ever hung out, gave us the whole playbook, like didn't hold back. He was just so warm and so great. And just in every other resource, Scott Rayo, like before we kind of consummated a more official relationship with him, he was just, he was under our FECA with a flashlight, like, what the hell is wrong with you guys? You don't know how to brew coffee. And I think we can pat ourselves on the back for being receptive to that. I think like we were beat down so hard by like the first months of entrepreneurship that we like, it kind of made us, it kind of like humbled us into this point where it's just like, any advice is good. Negative feedback is a gift. Like, bring it on.
We also never were like laboring under the belief that we were doing things perfectly. And, the most critical eye on our shops is generally, and on our coffee is generally our own. So when somebody tells us like, you're doing everything wrong, we have historically had the wherewithal to say, okay, well, what is it? Like, how?
Yeah.
If we did this, do you think it'd be better?
And we're like, I know. We are.
And it takes some time to fix those things.
Yeah. And like sometimes you never fix the things perfectly. Sometimes you get 60% of the way. But like, if you are constantly working towards making everything a little bit better, like you see the benefits of it over time. And like I we have tried to fix our espresso, make it better. We've tried to fix our filter coffee. There's always like some pinnacle or ideal that we work towards, and we never make it all the way, but we always make some progress, and we always come back to it to try again.
Beautiful. Where can people stay up to date with your progress with this project and G&B and etc.?
It's a really good question. I mean, our Instagram, but our mailing list is pretty alive right now, and that's because we're renovating our website.
Okay.
We hired basically the best person to lead that effort. It was Virginia Bauman, who was one of the co-founders of Tonks on the digital side.
All right.
And she's helping. We're basically investing in our e-commerce in the same way that we would invest in a store. And so eventually our website will be full of news. Right now it's just what it's always been, which is a place to buy hats and find out our hours.
Okay.
But the Instagram has a lot going on, but like if you go to our website, sign up for the mailing list, and that's when like we are actually really good at keeping that refreshed and alive.
Excellent. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking time. I know
Thanks.
things are just nuts right now, so
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, because Coffee Fest is in town.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you came.
Thank you.
Well, like I said in the beginning, I'm really thankful to have gotten an opportunity to sit down with Kyle and Charles, especially amidst all of the action taking place in their business. It was so generous of them to take an hour out of their day and be able to share with all of us on this show their experiences as entrepreneurs and their experiences transitioning to roasting their own coffee. It's such a big move, and it's going really well for them. So I'm really happy for that as well. I think it's since 2007 since I've seen Kyle and Charles. In fact, I think it was Kyle Glanville who beat me at a throwdown at Intelligentsia's Roasting Works way back then in the USBC. So good job, Kyle. So anyway, it was really a treat to talk with them. So thanks, guys, for taking the time. One of the things that I really loved about this was that we kept kind of circling back to this idea of reaching out to the community and getting feedback and being vulnerable by asking for help, first of all, and receiving feedback that's critical of what you're doing so that you can get better than what you are. I mean, it's not just for if you're roasting your own coffee, it's also for any kind of endeavor you're taking on where you are not an expert and you want to become one, or you want to at least be functionally high quality. This is something in a shift break episode that I was talking about before, and when they said it in this episode, I was really like, yes, this is exactly what we were talking about. It was a shift break talking about reaching out and networking basically with your community and asking advice or writing a letter or making contact with somebody who you might have thought previously was inaccessible because of whatever gulf there is between you and that person. Now, if people like Kyle and Charles, who are pretty well connected in the industry and have a long history of friendships, relationships, etc., can still feel like that, you know that this is just something that we all have to deal with, and they're advocating that we do reach out to people for help, even the ones that you think might not have the time. And they might actually say no, but more often than not, I agree with what Kyle was saying, which is they're excited to help. If somebody writes a letter, it's like that rarely happens. So if you're trying to take your business to the next step, whatever that is, if it's roasting your own coffee or expanding, there are lots of people out there in the industry who are willing to share some insights with you. And again, I want to thank Kyle and Charles for doing that for us here and kind of paying it forward by sharing their experiences. So if you want the show notes for this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com, and on the website there you'll find a sidebar where you can put your email address, and once you do that, you'll be signed up to receive a weekly newsletter that will have the show notes in it, as well as news about Keys to the Shop, upcoming events, and some information also about Keys to the Shop consulting. So just enter your email address in there, and away you go. It's as easy as that. Now, if you want to reach out to me directly, you can email me at chris@keystotheshop.com. That's chris@keystotheshop.com. And I look forward to hearing from you. Yeah, it's really great to hear from the listening audience here at Keys to the Shop. And speaking of that, I just want to reiterate how great it was to get to see all of you over at Coffee Fest LA. The sessions, lectures on management and leadership went fantastically. The conversations I had with a bunch of you after the sessions were inspirational, and I hope were also helpful. But it was really great for me to connect with you, and it was just a great time in general. So thank you all of you who attended and introduced yourself. I really appreciate you. So that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you have an amazing week. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.